Hey everybody, Brandon here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to continue our London system, and looks like we're not, but we are at the same time. Who knows? Okay, and we're getting C5. So against C5, I think I've played E3 before, and I think I've played C3. I think C3 might be better if you're a London player, just because if you want to have the opportunity to play bishop f4, you need to leave your pawn on e2 for the moment. So I'm just going to play C3 and let them get away with it. Generally, I think this trade is potentially quite good for black. It depends on how they follow up, of course. If they just go for some sort of d5, then I'm not really sure if it really benefits them at all, but it does depend on their follow-ups. So h6 is a bit interesting. So if I go bishop f4, then they can try knight f6, knight d5 stuff, but I think we should just go into it and allow all of their tricks. So knight f6, I might just go e3 or something, or maybe rook c1. Rook c1 feels like a excellent move. So if knight d5, then we can just meet it with bishop g3. So yeah, this is kind of the point of people that play an early c5 or even e6 move 1 against d4, is that against these Londons, sometimes having the pawn on d6 is a bit more beneficial than if you were to, say, leave or bring the pawn to d5, because all of a sudden these two squares become just a little bit weaker as a result. I'm going to play rook to c1. Okay, and I don't mind playing something like queen to b3 with a3 ideas. Yeah, and I think we should take with the queen, unfortunately. If we take with the rook and they take, we don't want to take with the rook, but we also don't want to take with the pawn. But I think taking like this is okay. We could try queen c7 here. Also just bishop d3, focusing on development. They can play moves like, ooh, knight c5 would be strange, but bad. But yeah, they can play moves like knight c6, we castle. We're just focusing on our development, and that can be sometimes really annoying to deal with, because they put themselves in a situation where it's kind of hard to develop harmoniously. I'm looking at this move, d5, trying to punish the fact that they haven't fully castled yet. Well, they can't castle, but their king is just a little bit weak. So I like this move d5. I think it's an interesting try. I think rook rook hc8, my apologies, could be interesting. I don't mind taking, actually, here. It is just a trade and everything, but it does create some weaknesses for them. Now, how do I take? The bishop? Probably with the bishop. And I'll let them take on b2. Oh, they can't take on b2. Okay, this is something I was missing. But if we actually let them take on f1, which they, I think, should here, we take with the bishop. It's important to note that this actually cannot be taken. And because of that, they're going to be left with a ton of weaknesses, which is excellent for us. I'm not sure exactly what they're thinking. The whole reason I went into this is because now, if we, yeah, so they actually fell into it here, which is good. But the reason why I made that exchange instead of just taking immediately is because they could have tried something like rook h to c8. Whereas when we have our queen on h8 as before, they can't develop their knight without their rook hanging. And that's extremely annoying for them. So it's definitely worth a consideration if you can prevent your opponent's development, especially when their king is weak. Usually the advantage is just too much. So I should probably take this pawn. I didn't for some reason. I was just focusing on getting my knight into the game, which isn't a bad way to play either. If they go knight a6, then I'll just take. It's not like they can develop their knight easily anyways. Yeah. And now they lose a piece. So if rook b8, there's two ways to win. There's queen a6, and there's knight c6. I prefer knight c6 because we're just forking the knight and the king. It's important to note that this bishop is actually pinned to the king, so knight c6, you cannot actually take that. And that makes our win just a little bit easier. It's always good to be greedy in these types of positions. Generally, the greed is going to be the best way to go about it. Yeah. Yeah, so let's check out that game, because I feel like I could have played that better, especially in the opening. So let's turn on the computer and everything. So the best way to play against these positions is going to be to play d5. And the problem is, if you're a dedicated London player like we're trying to be in this series, then if you play d5, you can't really get some sort of London. You're kind of just allowing some sort of Benoni. And to be fair, if some openings are begging you to not go into the London to get a worse position, you should probably go for it and learn how to go for it. So learning how to play these d5 positions is extremely important. I'd say the one thing to not do, though, is to take on c5. I think this is just going to give you a bad position. e5 is being recommended. I prefer e6 personally. And just trying to take on c5, and all of a sudden you get this weird sort of well, this is a Sicilian pawn structure, right? So if you can imagine some sort of like e4, knight f6, knight c3, and then bishop takes c5. Normally what happens is they take on d4 and you get a knight on d4, but here they're actually able to take on c5. Here there's like tactical problems with e5. So this might be a little, bit of an exception. But the point is, if they don't play like that, as they shouldn't, then they just get some sort of good version of a Sicilian. And that's exactly what we want to avoid. So you never take on c5. It's best to go either c3 or even e3 or d5. Again, as a London player, if you go e3, then good luck getting your bishop to f4. But yeah, that's kind of an explanation as to why our opponents equalize so easily. So e6, knight c3. Yeah, we could have also gone e4, which is interesting. That's actually really good. But yeah, trying to stay true to the London system. We have to accept that there's going to be certain things that we're going to let our opponents get away with, especially if we don't want to learn those other systems. Like if you don't want to learn how to play against the Benoni, you can still get a fine position playing c3, but you do have to recognize exactly what problems are coming from it, and that is, again, the inability to punish their opening decisions. So g5, bishop g3, and this doesn't really help them too much. We can always try some sort of h4, and yeah, we have just a great position where we just focus on our natural development. And king e7 is a little strange, but it's hard to suggest much better. I was expecting some sort of rook c8. I think that's absolutely necessary here. But they didn't go for it, and d5 comes, and again rook c8, just pretty much is begging to be played, and that's kind of what I was expecting them not to find. So especially at the lower levels here, you're going to see a lot of people, whenever they're faced with problems of complications, they'll go for captures, mainly, not really threats. And that is a good way to calculate. You should look at the captures first, or checks, then captures, and then the threats. But making automatic moves like knight takes g3 just land you in a lot of trouble after queen takes h8. Despite it being an equal material trade, if we just take on f1 here, which isn't even necessary to do immediately, well, their knight can't develop because their rook is going to hang. So pretty much they're playing down two pieces. And it's equal material. So that's really, really, really bad for them. Engine is saying e takes d5. I just don't believe in it. If we just play something like knight to d4, all of our pieces are amazing. And this is what I was intending in the game, is if they took, then I'd play knight d4. And the idea is if they take on b2, there's actually a mistake with this or problem with this. Can you find out the refutation? Okay, so the refutation here is knight to f5 with check, or knight c6. I prefer knight f5 check to not develop their pieces for them, and the queen is hanging. As before, when the b2 pawn is undefended or defended, and then you undefend it, sometimes you can just still defend it, or you are still defending it. In this case, we are still defending b2, but it's an easy move to miss. So anyways, that's going to cover it for this game. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, bye-bye.